Josh George, SEC, college football. How are we doing today? Answer in the comments. Look, we're going to start with the East. We're going to go bottom to top, starting with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has had 5 wins over the last 3 years, and, well, even though they had 2 quarterbacks pass for over 1,000 yards last season, with the way Ken Seals and Mike Wright were at quarterback, they were still 128th in the nation on offense, and they were dead last in the field position battle in the SEC. Ultimately, I predict Vanderbilt to go 3-9 and 0-8 in conference play. The Missouri Tigers. When Eli Drinkwitz entered the conference, he had 1 loss and 11 wins. He now has 13 losses. He is 23-13 as a coach. He did bring in 5-star wide receiver Luther Burden to add to this offense, but they were 66th in the nation last year as far as passing offense goes, and they were dead last in some categories on defense in the SEC. And they do have 8 starters coming back on this defense, but defensive coordinator Blake Baker is going to have his work cut out for him, as they're rated 13th in talent in the 247 talent composite. So I forecast 5-7 and 2-6 in conference play for the Missouri Tigers. Now the South Carolina Gamecocks, they bring in Spencer Rattler, and they have one of the best tight end groups in the SEC in Jam Bell and Travion Kenyon and Austin Stogner. And they will be part of an offense that was 111th last season in the nation. So something that will need to be improved, certainly in the pass game. But they do return all of their offensive line and go 7 deep there as far as rotation goes. But they did have the best passing defense in the SEC last season and returned 7 starters on defense. And it is a defense made up of all juniors and seniors. So, should have some experienced guys who have played in college there before. I'll predict 6-6 and 3-5 for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Tennessee Vols. Look, Hendon Hooker has NFL potential at quarterback, as he threw for 2,945 yards and rushed for 616 yards, and threw the fewest INTs or interceptions in the SEC, only throwing 3. Even the Heisman winner threw 7 interceptions last season. And this offense was 21 in efficiency last season, but their D was 99th in the nation, even though their top 2 prospects happened to be on defense in Ty West and James Pierce. Look, they could be really good if the defense improves, and they could really hit a ceiling, especially if Hendon Hooker grows up and is just as good as he was last year and a little bit better. I project 8-4 and 4-4 in conference play. Now, Kentucky, they have hitched their wagon to Will Levis, who led this offense to be 38th in scoring. And they bring back running back Chris Rogers Jr., who had 1,379 yards last season. But with only 5 starters back on defense, even though it was a 26th in the nation defense, they were last in the SEC in turnovers. And they were 32nd in the nation in special teams. So if they can improve in some of those areas, this team could find themselves fantastic. I've got them 9-3 and 5-3 in conference play. The Florida Gators, they bring in Billy Napier at head coach. And even though we don't know who their starting quarterback, running back, or some of their top wide receivers will be just yet, because they ended up losing all those, they do have their top offensive line back, and they were 40th in the nation in rushing offense last season. Billy Napier was at Louisiana. And he will likely bring a rush first style to this team that was 100 and they were 113th in the turnover margin last year. The Florida Gators were. Well, Billy Napier at Louisiana, second in the turnover battle in the nation last year. So that could be huge for Florida. The turnover change, I project 9-3, 5-3 in conference play. The Georgia Bulldogs. The Georgia Bulldogs had the best rushing defense in the nation last year and held teams to 10 points per game last season. And they had the 10th best offense in the nation last season. And they bring back starting quarterback and game manager Stetson Bennett. And he'll be surrounded by 7 starters coming back on offense. But they only have 3 starters back on defense. So there is some questions there for the Dogs, just lacking starters back on defense. I've got them 11-1 and 7-1 in conference play. Now to the West. Look, the Auburn Tigers have Brian Harrison as a head coach, and he started a podcast. If you want to learn more about them, watch his podcast, because he's trying to get off the hot seat, even though a poll came out and showed that all the SEC coaches had 60% plus satisfactory rating from their fan base. Brian Harris was one of the lowest and is one of the likely ones to get fired this season. He does return Tank Bigsby at running back, who had more than 1,000 yards last season. And some people project them to have 2,000-yard backs with Bigsby and Jacaz Hunter, who rushed for a little over 500. And they're expecting this team to put the ball on the ground a lot more with the departure of Bo Nix and the quarterback room kind of hanging in the balance. But this team was 9th in the SEC in defense and only returns 5 starters back. So they could be challenged on defense, could be a ball control team that runs the ball, and the teams in the SEC that can stop the run are just going to be a mismatch for these Auburn Tigers. I project 5-7 and 2-6. Mississippi State. Will Rogers, not that one, the quarterback Will Rogers. He had a little over 4,700 yards last season passing the football, but he rushed for just 97. Negative 97, that is. I say, boy. As he was a pocket passer and didn't run the football that well. Their defense was also inconsistent, as they gave up 20-plus yards more than any team in the SEC. Look, I project Mike Leach's team to go 7-5 and 3-5 in conference play. The Arkansas Razorbacks were number 1 in rushing offense in the SEC last season. They also had KJ Jefferson at quarterback, and he's coming back. He was a top quarterback, and he led this team in rushing. They also had 5 other players with rushing attempts and are projected to be in the top 25 on offense this season. But they were 50th in rushing defense last year. And the biggest key for them was second down, where they were 51% at getting a first down on that play. And if they gave up on defense, if they gave up a big play, it was usually on second down. So that's going to be a huge key for them this season, is how are they going to perform on defense on second down and on offense on second down. I project them at 7-5 and 4-4 in conference play. The LSU Tigers. Brian Kelly left Notre Dame to come play in the same division as Nick Saban because this is where he thinks he can win a championship. And he got this team up to 4th in recruiting in the 247 talent composite and 3rd in the total talent 247 talent composite. His quarterback is questionable, but I expect it to be Jaden Daniels because of his speed. Vegas projects this team at 7-5, and the FBI expects this team to get 9 wins. They only have 3 starters back on offense and 3 starters back on defense. Tons of question marks. I personally project them 8-4 with 4-4 conference record. The Ole Miss Rebels. Look, Lane Kiffin has been praised as the Matt Mummy of our time, and they have 5 starters back on offense and a one Jackson Dart who transfers in, and they have 3 senior wide receivers who will pay huge dividends as the different routes and the different option routes that you will see this season. It'll be Dart's job to get them to the expert wide receivers at finding the hole in the zone and things like that. This team was also 19th on defense last season and one of the best turnover teams in the nation last year as they led that category through 6 games in the SEC. Now, the big thing to know about Ole Miss is they were 10-3 last year, and they haven't had that many 10-win seasons. 55, 59, 60, 62, 71, 03, and 2015, and of course last year, are their only 10-win seasons that they've ever had, and they've always regressed after a 10-win season. I've got them 9-3 and 5-3 in conference play. Texas A&M. An article called We Too Deep about the Texas A&M wrote about the Texas A&M #1 recruiting class in the nation and their senior talent to go with it. A lot of young freshmen, a lot of aged seniors make up Jen Bofischer's team this year, but they only have 9 total starters back across offense and defense. So there is a question mark about returning production, not necessarily about talent. And Jimbo can use talent. He's 34-14, and he led this team to 14th in field position in the nation last season. And of course, the Sim projection has this team at 10 wins. I've got them at 9-3 and 5-3 in conference play. Alabama, need I say more? Look, Alabama has the #1 quarterback, Heisman winner Bryce Young coming back, and the #1 defensive player in Will Anderson coming back. They also have the best linebacker in Henry Tutu coming back. And for first round defensive back projection, Jordan Battle. In fact, they have 10 guys on defense projected to wind up being drafted into the NFL next season, and 7 guys on offense projected to go to the NFL. This Nick Saban team of 2022, I expect, will be compared to the '87 Miami team, just a team that rolled over every team they faced. I've got them 12-0 and 8-0 in conference play, making an appearance in the conference championship game against the Georgia Bulldogs in what will inevitably be a revenge game. Alabama will win that game. They'll be 13-0, and that'll push Georgia to 11-2. I'll be putting out a top 25 of what I expect the College Football Playoff Committee to release their top 25 as sometime in the coming days. I'm Josh George. This was my SEC preseason projections.